is what we're doing. I'm going to talk first about power. Everybody needs power, preferably renewable, right? And sharing power can create synergy and strength. I have a whole nother talk that's just about power. If you want to talk about that, and the forms of power. Power between people, power that can be shared, power that can be given. The basis for building a relationship that's very productive in the field of engineering. So we don't like this statement of it's mine and you can't have it. And all of us know that there are some people who act like that. Right? We run into them and they're very frustrated. So I've spent my life in constant transformation. I reinvent myself every 10 years. Completely pivot, go somewhere else. Right? That's been my style. It's not too many professor styles. Most professors get tenure and stay where they are. Right? But I've resigned tenure 3 times so far. Right? So, constant transformation. I've learned a lot of things, built new skills, forgotten so many things that I once knew, and maybe even gained a little wisdom. But I'm to the point now where instead of waiting to transform, waiting for something to transform and empower me, I'm just going to do it myself. Right? And I encourage everyone else to do that as well. And remember, as Maggie Thatcher once said, being powerful is like being a lady. If you have to tell people you are, you aren't. Right? To be self-evident. So, my strategy. Those of you who know me, I'm not particularly a politician. Right? I'm a very direct person. You ask me a question, I'll tell you what I think. I don't have time to wait or waste. I'm too old. I'm almost 75 years old. And I'm not going to sit around and wait another 10 years to have things happen. I'm very direct and immediate, but I'm not brittle. So if you don't like what I'm saying, you call me on it. It's okay. I don't go crazy and back off. I started out my life with stubbornness, being one of the few women in most things that I was ever doing. I went to college when I was 16 in 1966, long before most of you were born. Okay? So I've been around for quite a while. And I started and got through it with stubbornness. I just said, I'm going to do it. Now, don't look around at anybody else. I'm going to do it. Didn't matter where I was or who else was there. Nowadays, my vision is getting increasingly peripheral. I can see things off to the side that aren't in my straight line that you might think I'm going. I'm never a straight line person. I'm always looking out to the side. What else is happening? What else is happening over there? I pivot to opportunities that appear and act. Sometimes precipitously, sometimes driving people crazy, I guess. Or I make the opportunities happen if they're not there. Right? But I'm moving. Try very hard to keep my sense of humor. And if anything, that probably saves me in a number of places. But I also intervene to protect people because we're in college systems here. All of you who are students, you know there's some things you would not say to a professor. Straight out, you wouldn't do it, right? And your kids don't ask you some of the things that they want to ask. Position of power and power and authority. So if you've ever been with me in a lecture and somebody starts using him and her all the time, I will immediately speak up at the start of the lecture and say, or her, or she, right? Just remind them right from the start that what they were saying was not acceptable in this environment. People give unnecessarily gendered stories. They could change things. They're not things. Don't need to be inserting gender in everybody. And we've got some people that are just have poor judgment in terms of what they do. And you have to call them on that too. So I'm the one who does that. Look at my history. I started off in geology. Not really. I started off in chemistry. But the geologists were much better frisbee players, so I switched to geology. And that's the reason I'm different too. Right? I was clueless. I was a young kid, 16 years old, didn't know what the heck was going on, right? I had got there until 1972, and I was going on to get a PhD in geology. And I finally just said, no. What was going on in 1972? We still had the Vietnam War. You know this Vietnam War situation? Well, all of my friends were getting drafted. I said, I'm out of here. I'm going to go. So I left, went over to England, over to the continent, hitchhiked around. did a lot of stupid things and nothing bad happened. So, good show, right? Finally decided to come back. Got a call from the Peace Corps saying, do you want to be a Peace Corps volunteer? I said, sure. So 3 months later, I was in Ecuador. I do not speak Spanish. I did not speak Spanish. I put it into learning Spanish enough to be able to teach geology. Came back, sang in a bar for a while down in Charleston, South Carolina. This was the era of the Eagles. Have you ever heard of the Eagles? So I know every Eagles song and I don't want to know them. I'm a jazz singer, but they're in my head. What can I do? Then I got a call from an old friend saying they're putting a night shift down the Alaska pipeline. You want a job? And I said, sure. 3 days later, I was in Fairbanks working on the pipeline. Worked on the pipeline for about 2.5 years. And what was good about that was I suddenly had financial power. I mean, the perk of, you always know when you're growing up, when your father calls you up and asks for a loan to buy a car. You know, that's not too many fathers would ask their kids that. But I was up on the North Slope of Alaska, there was nowhere to spend money. So it was just sitting there accumulating, and he borrowed it. At the end of that, I still wasn't an engineer. Right? Some of the people I've been working with wanted to hire me, and I said, because I was the lead engineer north of the Yukon for the pipeline supports. And I said, well, I'm not really an engineer. And he said, well, we'll hire you anyway. And they took me to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Anybody ever been to Tulsa? That's not my kind of town at all. No, Tulsa. I lasted there for about 3 or 4 months. Then I packed everything up and I went to the University of Oklahoma in Norman. Could be an engineer. I thought I would be a geotechnical engineer, but I ended up getting a master's in structural engineering. My master's was lateral torsional buckling of tapered beams. It was computational. It was code written in Fortran. I had 3 boxes of cards, and to get the cards run, I take them out with cookies to the off-campus IBM 360 and beg people to run my deck so that I could see what was going on. That's what happened. Then I decided to become a professor, and I went up to Cornell University. There was the first time I ran into a bunch of women. There were like 7 or 8 women in the graduate program at Cornell in geotechnical engineering. That was the first time I ever ran into that. So I got my PhD, and then I took a position offered at the University of Texas at Austin because it was probably going to be the hardest place to go. And I said, if I can make it in Texas, I can make it. So I did that. Worked in Texas for about 14 years. 2 years before I resigned from Texas, I got a call from the National Science Foundation saying, do you want to come to Washington? And I said, sure. So I went to Washington on loan for 2 years. Then I resigned and became a fellow. Worked at the National Science Foundation, stayed there for about 11 years. And then when George Bush got reelected in 2004, I said, that's enough of that. And I started looking for a job. My middle name is Provost. NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, is looking for a provost. So they thought it would be perfect for me to be Provost, Priscilla Provost Nelson. So I was up there at NJIT being the provost. I wasn't even sure what a provost did. I took the job at all. But I did learn one thing very clearly. You don't get at odds with the president. The provost should never get at odds with the president. Well, that didn't stop me. And this president wanted to have NJIT, little NJIT in Newark, as they say there, Newark, New Jersey, become NCAA 1A teams. And I argued against it. I said, no, we have a whole lot more things to do with that money rather than pay for coaches and everything else. But I couldn't change his mind. He also picked a fight with the Alumni Association. It's one thing that you don't want to do, by and large, pick a fight with the Alumni Association. And I got in the middle of that. So eventually I said, no, I think I stepped down. I can't be your provost. The next year, I was elected president of the faculty. So I'm back in there working with the president. This time, I got the boxing gloves on. So it was good. But I got this job offer from Colorado School of Mines. Said, do you want to come out here and become the department head for mining engineering? And I said, sure. I did. So I did. Over my career, I've only had one class ever taught by a woman. And that was Shakespeare. Never taken a class from a woman. I was the first woman faculty member in civil engineering and the fourth one in the College of Engineering in Texas. I was the first woman division director and the first woman provost and the first woman department head at the Colorado School of Mines. So these are all first things, and anytime I do something like that, I get to reinvent myself and see how I feel. People there don't remember how I was 10 years ago, which is good, because that gives me the freedom to change. My stories regarding gender. Rochester, Indiana. I was a caver. We go caving. Deep pits, 1,000-foot deep pits on ropes. Was down visiting, I have an uncle who's a mining engineer. And he had a big mine in Tennessee. And went to visit him. And I said, I want to take my friends, there were 4 of us, and go underground. And he said, no, you can't go underground. I kept at him. And he finally decided that there were 2 girls and 2 guys. I had long hair. My hair was down here. I was a hippie chick. That's what I was. He put the hair up underneath the hard hat, put on a big coveralls and a hood, and just get on that Jeep and he knocked that off. So we got underground, but nobody knew we were there. They would never have done that. Pipeline, Alaska, I took that job in Mike because there were no ceilings. If you could do the job, you got the responsibility. Nobody asked you if you were a woman. Nobody asked if you were an engineer. You knew what you were doing? Take the job as lead engineer. Go and do it. And that's very good environment to walk into. If you're in a company ever and you don't have that freedom and that opportunity, leave the company. Go find somewhere else, because there are some places that you can get that kind of a feel. At Oklahoma, I took the challenge to switch over to structural engineering. I had to take DiffyQ. I was 28 years old taking DiffyQ. Right? I'm sitting there in a class on elasticity taught by my advisor. And he's writing COSH and SIN and COSH and cinch on the board. And at the end of the lecture, I went up to him and I said, what are COSH and cinch? What are these things? And he said, I think you better drop the class. I said, no, just tell me what they are. I'll go learn. Just in time learning. Took a finite element course that was all on variational calculus. I didn't know anything about variational calculus. The professor's up there writing del dot. Everything's del dot. And then I went up after class and said, excuse me, what is del dot? And he said, I think you better drop the class. No. You tell me what it is. I'll go figure it out. So you start reinforcing yourself when you take chances like that and you realize, okay, I can do that just because I haven't done it before. Does not mean I can't do it now, right? And probably I could figure out how to do it. So you gain confidence as you do things. For now, the critical mass of women made a big change in the environment of the classroom and the environment of the school. Because we had so many women, we rented a house, they had 6 women, all in the house. That was the party house, of course. Right. UT Austin, first thing happened, a bunch of women graduate students came over to my house saying they wanted to talk to me. There had been all sorts of things going on with racy posters in laboratories, all sorts of things that are inappropriate, not appropriate. And they were very upset. So the middle person went and talked to the faculty. Faculty just looked at me and said, what are you talking about? What's wrong with that poster? No, something wrong with that poster. Keep it down. Because that is not the image that we want of our students in graduate study. We had obnoxious male faculty. Some of them were very good and strong supporters, but there are a number of them that had never stopped believing that the world that was there before I was there was the right world, and therefore I'm the wrong one. Right? And I found myself being the case of the reluctant role model. I didn't want to be a role model, but I started noticing that students were watching me to see what I did. So even though I don't want to be a role model, I am. So I have to be aware of that. It's like a Perry Mason mystery, the case of the reluctant role model. At NSF, I arrived in Washington, first meeting I went to. Everybody in the room was a male and they assumed I was there to get coffee and hot coats. That didn't work very long. I informed them what was going on. Ran into my first real mentors. Ron Sack and Joe Bordonia. Joe wanted me to stay, that's why I did stay. And Ron Sack was he was the previous department or division director. He sat down and did his own salary analysis and found out that my salary was way out of whack with the male salaries. So completely changed my salary, gave me this huge bump and raise. It's pretty nice. I didn't even know it. And proof it happened. So there are people watching out for you. International engagement. And that point I was in underground construction. And took a bunch of people over to Taiwan, shortly after the last big earthquake that they had in Taiwan. And we're sitting there having wonderful meals, eating shark soup and other things. And somebody came over to me and said, we're planning a visit to one of the tunnel construction sites, because Taipei was building the tunnels at that point. And he said, I'm very sorry, but you won't be able to go. And I said, well, I'm not going to cause an international incident, but this is very disappointing. Right? So it's fine. She came back 2 hours later saying, you can go now. And that's great. Okay. I said, great. We're not doing an international incident. And we went down to the project site underground. There was nobody there. They had let the work crews go home early so that when I showed up to go underground, they weren't there and didn't know it. So this is something that was in 1999, right? This isn't something that was just 50 years ago. This was still here. But while I was at NSF, I founded the American Rock Mechanics Association. Some of you know about IRMA. I was in on the Geo Institute founding for ASCE and president. I was appointed by Clinton to the Nuclear Waste Technical Review Board, which meant I have to go testify in front of Congress and testify in front of the people out in Las Vegas, which is very interesting. I started a program called Power, Dr. Power, which is professional opportunities for women in research and education. And this was an opportunity for women like me who want to diagnose their own pivot. I've been doing this for a very long time. I want to go in that direction. And that's what I want to do. And so it was a research grant that could get them off in that direction. Faculty mentoring, people started calling me up. I was having lots of faculty run around the United States calling me up, wanting to talk through their ideas. So got to mentor them that way. I was the first director of the Network for Earthquake Engineering Simulation, which is continuing even now. And I was very much involved in cross-agency initiatives, particularly to deal with hazards and to deal with infrastructure. And while I was there, 9/11 happened. And after that, there was a whole bunch of work on infrastructure and everything else going on in the United States. So pretty interesting. At NJIT, first thing I did was I had a workshop. I found about 28 women who were in higher education advanced positions. So this is women who happened to have made it to the president or the provost or a dean's position or a vice president for research. And I invited them all to come to NJIT, and they did. We spent 3 days talking about the experience that we had. In fact, most of the women in that period in the 2000s decided not to become a department head. That job was too hard. So they left over that and became a dean, and many of them failed miserably. So try to figure out why that was the case. You can go on ResearchGate and you can find the report of that workshop if you're interested. So I think research on REACT. I developed the first power story in working with industry and with alumni talking about power and how different sectors can share power and build power. And I told you about the president here and me and president of the faculty. At Mines, I'm very interested in lots of things at Mines. Mining industry, I think, is wonderfully interesting. But I was very interested as well in gender balance or lack of, and intellectual balance. Some of you have heard of the Myers-Briggs test. It's not a test, it's an assessment of how you like to think, how you like to work. And I asked the faculty and I asked the graduate students to take that. And all of the faculty were ISTJs or INTJs. All of the graduate students were ISTs, all of them. And so the conclusion that I had was that the faculty were very good at recruiting people who were just like them. But how do you recruit the people who are not like them? Right? And that's what you need to do, because you have to change some things. What you're doing right now is just bringing in more of the same. Right? Let's think about how to change things. So, and then when COVID hit, I took a pivot to tailings and just took a deep dive, took a year sabbatical, deep dive in tailings, and just have been doing that pretty much ever since. All right, so tenure during my time at Mines, we've got a number of faculty hires. The majority of them are women. Right? And a number of joint appointments that brought additional women in. When we have a faculty meeting now, we have lots of women in the room. Right? It's much more gender balanced, and it's very much intellectually balanced. Different, right? Different people have different priorities, right? Look around for what's going on with women overall. The National Mining Museum. Many of you have been up there to Leadville. If you haven't, before you leave town, go up to the National Mining Museum in Leadville. You look through, as of 2021, they had inducted 260 people into the Hall of Fame. Right? There were 7 women. And if you look at them all, they were all dead, and they were all inducted after they died. Right? So evidently there are no women currently who are worthy of this honor. Although they've changed it a little bit in the last 2 years, had a few women come in, but it's pretty amazing that women were not involved. And if you look at the National Academy of Engineering, which had a priority for getting women in, you look at the number of women elected back up until about 2010, it was only like typically 3 or 4 a year would get in. This is for all of engineering, all the fields. So it includes biomedical, everything, right? They put a priority on it, but that priority only meant that there were maybe only about 10% of the people coming in were women. So there's still work to be done here in the National Academy, because women are not represented very well. So I think about my heroes, who in spite of how this notification are my heroes. And one of them is Janet Bonema. Has anybody ever heard of her? 1972, she was working construction, right? And she was really interested in the Straight Creek Tunnel. That's now the Eisenhower Tunnel for the Interstate 70 to go across. They advertised to hire some people. She put in an application. They mistyped her name. And she got a letter saying, Mr. Janet Bonema can have a job. So she showed up, and everyone said, no, no, no. We can't hire you to go underground in the tunnel. She filed suit. We had just had a number of changes in congressional law. The Equal Employment Opportunity Act of '64 brought that in. She filed suit in 1972 and won. Right? First day she went back on the job, 70 workers walked off, but they came back the next day. So it was pretty interesting. So despite being shunned by fellow workers, and that continued throughout the whole thing, and labeled a troublemaker, she had tenacity and a sense of justice that just really changed things. But that was 1972. Not that long ago. Betty Gibbs. Anybody here know Betty Gibbs? She's worked with MMSA, but she got her bachelor's and master's degrees at Mines. And it took her 9 years to do that because she was working at the same time and raising her daughter, right? But she got the degree, juggling her studies. When she went showing up for job interviews, nobody really wanted to hire her. She finally got a job in Climax, at the Climax mine up by Leadville, and it was the first woman that worked underground at Climax. Right? Really interesting lady. And 2 more that I can mention. Barb Vilas, some of you know Barb. She's hung around the department for several years. She graduated from the University of Arizona in '78. And that was when the last laws that were banning women from working in the mining industry were getting undone. But there was also a big change in the 70s. Some of you might remember, 72 was the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency. Before that, we didn't have any environmental protection going on. And this happened after Earth Day. She made a pivot and decided, all right, my degree is in mining, but I'm going to become an environmental and compliance person. So she developed her career in that direction. She was instrumental in creating the environmental division of SME. She was in the student mentoring program. She was the society's 48th president of SME, first woman to be president. So she worked with our programs over the past 10 years, and last year she was elected into the National Academy of Engineering. Right? One of the people was out. Kim Morrison, some of you may get to meet her in the future. She's a civil engineer, who's been working in the mining industry under mine tailings management. She was an independent consultant, then worked for a number of other firms, and finished off her career working with Newmont. And she's given them the notice, and the end of April is the last day she will be a Newmont employee. And I hope she spends more time around here. She was the ramrod that created the two books that SME has published, the handbook on the tailings management handbook and the case history book that just came out. So she ran them through. There are too many people who could have worked with SME and so many authors of so many chapters to actually get it done and to get it done on time. So she's one of my heroes. Not a hero. One of my not a hero is Queen Victoria. I assumed that she was a very nice lady, but she was rather limited in her capacity to understand things that were outside of the royal framework. So women had been working in mining for centuries, right? Very strong in mining. In some areas, there's a strong tradition of women being in mining. But it was really with the Industrial Revolution that women really started getting into those high-paying jobs. They wanted the high-paying jobs. Well, there was a problem, an incident at one of the collieries up in the northern part of England, which is a coal mine colliery. There were people killed, and Victoria realized that a lot of the people who were killed were little boys and women, right? So she set up an inquiry after that incident, which led to the Mines and Collieries Act of 1842. And this act prohibited boys under the age of 10 and all females from working in underground mines. Now, that meant that a lot of lucrative jobs were no longer available to women. And given that late 1800s, they had to go into what I call here more insecure areas of work. A lot of women became jobless and destitute. There was a lot of prostitution going on. Family-run businesses became unstable. And the few women who did want to mine were doing it illegally. And therefore they got pushed into criminal activity. And so what happened because of this law that was passed, that was meant in one way, there were consequences. And the consequences were not just in England. So it went throughout the British Empire. And there were a lot of countries that followed this British Empire or that were British colonies. All of those colonies passed the same laws. And suddenly women could no longer work in any of those countries in mining. Right? That's the way it happened. The ILO, the International Labor Organization, became a spokesperson for this, but in the 1930s, they were very much anti-women working in mines. And they passed many of their documents, their policies, that the employment of women underground in mines no longer exists or is dying out within the metropolitan territories of the state members of the ILO. And that convention related to women was ratified by 98 member countries, and it's still in force in 68 countries today. Which I bet a lot of you didn't know that. So, situation now. 200 years ago, there were many, many more women working in mining than there are now. Right? It was closer to even. In India alone, some of you might know this, percentage of women in mining went from 44% at the turn of that last century to 6% by the year 2000. And India was a British colony, right? So, in the UK, women were not allowed to work underground in the mines until the Employment Act of 1989 was passed. That replaced the Coal Mines Act in the Mines and Collieries Act. 150 years after the ban, they were now able to work in mining underground, right? And in 2018, the ILO recommended that when they have the next big meeting, and that was right pre-COVID, so they missed a couple of weeks. It's on the agenda for 2024, is to get rid of that convention for women not working in mining. Right? According to the World Bank, across the world, 60 countries still have laws on the books that restrict women's employment. Most of them related to that British Act. According to ILO, some 21.4 workers were employed in mining and quarrying in 2019, of which 3.1 were women, 3.1 million. That doesn't really capture the artisanal mining, whereas a whole lot more women working in artisanal mining than are working in large mining. And artisanal mining is tougher work to do, by and large, right? With regard to women in senior management positions, ILO gave a report that said 11% of the mining companies had women CEOs, lower than any other industry. And 11 of the top 40 mining companies didn't have women in any senior management position, which is a problem. So, in the US, what was going on? And this comes from a website that Holly Armstrong of MSHA did. In the US, there never was a federal law prohibiting women working in mining. There never was, right? It just became the culture. In 1965, Lyndon Johnson signed Executive Order 11246, which stated that companies with federal contracts could not discriminate in employment. That's 1965, right? And it arose because there had been discrimination. Nixon signed the Equal Employment Opportunity Act in 1972. That's the one that Janet used in order to file suit against the CDOT. And in 1974, Deanna Baldwin and Anita Cherry became the first women to work underground in Canada. A complaint was filed by those early women against the U.S. Department of Labor and the largest coal mines and companies, which was also found in the favor of women. So it's been changing a lot through the 70s and the 80s. In the 80s, attention turned to sexual discrimination and harassment, which was certainly present in the mining industry. And in 1983, there was a big conference thinking about women and personal protective gear, because nobody was making personal protective gear for women. And that caused some women to open up their own company and make their own protective gear that they could sell. Right? So today, women hold every type of job available in the U.S. mining industry. Not a whole lot of CEOs still, but people are getting there on the boards. In 2013, ILO did a survey asking companies what they thought were the significant barriers for women in mining. Why aren't there more? And they said, well, women have more family responsibilities. Well, we've sort of attacked that to a certain extent. Roles are assigned by society to men and women, and mining is not one for women. These are the old mosquitoes. As a masculine corporate culture, yes. Men are not encouraged to take leave for family responsibilities. The women are the ones that take leave. And then their entire career gets out of sync. Right? Because if they go away for a couple of years to raise kids, they've lost 2 years, and people want to know, what have you been doing for those 2 years? And I've forgotten things. You know, you're not 2 years older. And there's stereotypes against women for all sorts of things. So what really interested me was these other ones that they identified, which says women, insufficient management experience. And that's why they don't become managers. Well, that's a good way to keep it that way. Lack of leadership training. Management is a man's job. This is in 2013. Right? Not very long ago. There's few role models for women, yeah? There still are. Lack of company equality policies and programs, or those that are in play are unenforced. Lack of flexible work solutions. And I hope we come out of COVID and stay out of COVID with more flexible work solutions, the way we've been having in the last couple of years. And there's no strategy at all for retention of skilled women. I mean, that's sort of amazing. That's still the case by and large. We can look up in Canada, and they kept some data. Here's mining jobs with the highest percent women. Administrative assistant, office worker, HR, right? These aren't really mining. This is just any kind of a corporate environment. Lowest women, contractors and supervisors, mechanics, carpenters, the skilled laborers, and mining engineers get a little bit up, but still far from being equitably distributed across the genders. So in conclusion, I still don't have all the answers, but I'm getting better at figuring out what the questions are that we ought to be asking. So I hope you've thought different things while I was running through a little bit of that historical stuff, personal and general. But I'm sticking in mining because I'm stubborn still. So thank you very much. That's the last slide. If you have any questions or comments? Ready?
Where do you see the future going?
Who's future?
The situation, the current situation, given the historical context, is there light at the end of the tunnel?
I think the next 5 years will be extremely interesting. And mining could make a pivot, which I wish it would. But I don't think it's going to happen in 5 years. It might be within 10 years, and we need leadership that will pivot. And after you all some of you went to Red Conger's talk, and when he was asked about supporting research in universities, his comment was, I don't think I'll ever do that. I don't understand what you're doing in the university, and I don't understand what I'm getting back out of it, so probably not. And then that's a very common opinion about the mining industry. So I think that's my tips. If we actually develop a better, healthy relationship between academia and the industry, mining, I think we would see a whole lot more people coming through because they could see that there is a pipeline, there is a career you can develop. What's happening right now in tailings is what I think could happen more broadly. In tailings, there's quite a number of women involved in tailings, as opposed to underground hard rock mining and surface mining and stuff like this. There's a higher percentage of women in the service organizations. People are working for Caterpillar and oil, gas, explosives, and elsewhere, but working hardcore in the mining industry, that's still a tough enough to crack. But in mining, in tailings, we have a lot of women coming in, and women rising to leadership. And what's also happening in tailings is 10 years ago, tailings was a dead end. If you got stuck on tailings duty, that was you're not gonna go out of that, you're gonna figure out as fast as you can how you get out of it. But nowadays, really, people are thinking that they're making careers out of working in towns. And, it's much healthier. That's a segment of the mining industry. I think as we go more and more automated and robotic, as we go, maybe more and more towards zero waste, we're gonna get more interest in ideas, not people. The ideas that come in. But I don't think, maybe in 5 years we'll have started to change, but it's gonna be more like 10 years. Yes.
So, your talk was, really inspiring. In order, some thoughts, I'm a mining engineer, I studied mining engineering. But, I just want to share my experience with yours. Because when I was studying mining engineering, our department head was the woman. And I took so many classes from her. I had so many women faculty. So this environment actually didn't let me to think that women are disadvantaged. So I've seen this disadvantage position in my career when I become executive level, when I become a candidate for the executive level position. So I think, changing the culture is way important than, direct. You can have community loans, for example, like a race in Turkey, even 1938, that would be full rights for women. 48, but it was not the situation. But this allowed women to have an access to education and have education, partner at law. But situation never changed. Because the cultural connotations have more impact than the policies. So this was my.
So you try to listen for the voices of leadership who are saying the things that you think should be said. And there's so few. And you know how sassy I am. I ask questions when I'm around here. I do the same thing at big conferences. I mean, it's my job is to say the things that some people might be thinking, but wouldn't say. I would say, right? And that's, so I'm one kind of role model, but what we need are more kinds of role models. Because the way I am is not necessarily something that will make you say, I want to be like her. No, you might not want to be like her, but there is other role models that you do want to be like. So we have to have more role models so that we can actually have variety. Because it's really not a good idea for me to be the only one around with a role model. So that's why I hired a whole lot of women.
Yeah, my question is like, since you have a really long period of experience in different industries, how do you see the culture changes in construction, the acceleration of change? And how they manage to accelerate that change.
I have had a notable lack of success in the mining industry in terms of changing anybody's mind and stuff. Their minds get changed because they hire someone and they find out that they're clever and they can do things and they want to get them back. They want to be hired. So it's a very slow dribble of a pipeline coming in. I think it's very interesting. So many of the women are moving into service industries because those industries are more competitive than different kinds of engineers. More competitive. Salaries can be higher, but say the office environment, everything we do is quite different from what we do if you're working on a mine site. I think you can also handle, if you choose to have a kid, family, you can handle that more easily out of the service industry than you can out of a mainline mining operation. And, that's just the way the mining company, mining. is. But all of the parts of mining that have consulting instead of mainline mining, like the tailings management, they're a lot more than, because there's more numbers, they can back each other up. If someone's going to drop out that kid for a while and work, there's others coming in, and there's a place for them when they come back. So, the mining industry itself, I think, is almost clueless about what to do. And I've asked Red Conry about that, and he said, I don't know what to do. We have a workforce problem. I don't know what to do. I said, Red, we know what to do. You know, this is not a mystery. We know how to address the workforce issues. And he just wasn't listening. And his final statement to me was that we just don't know what to do. I said, so if everyone sitting at the table says we don't know what to do, that must be the truth, right? And they don't know what to do, so they're not going to do anything. But, you know, that's now, we do all sorts of things. We sit there in the back row and read our telephones rather than saying, hello, back row people. Hi. If you do that in my class, you get down the line.
So you didn't mention, but this is what I experienced from a leader. And, you know, women to have equal positions in executive level, they have to perform twice or three times
Yeah.
more than them.
And, but I have heard that, and I have some empathy with that. But what I also think is most women who do things differently than they are being done. And so to me, it's my job to figure out the best way to do it, whether it's the way in place or not. Right? And so I'm just feisty like that. And if you're trying to do the same thing, the job the same way the men would have done it, yeah, in order to shine, you have to do it better than they do. But if you're trying to do it a different way, that's even more better than what they're coming up with, that's the good thing. I'm done. All right, everybody tired?
Well, last question, I
Okay.
want to ask you the mining environment, are there some incentives for women that encourage them?
I'm sorry, that's just a question.
Yes, my question is in mining, mining environment, are there some incentives for women that would encourage them?
Ah, you think there are incentives for women in mining? I think they're so hungry for anybody who graduates from Colorado School of Mines that everybody's getting these offers. There's no additional incentives. And if the women go, the way they really are successful about getting women is by the internship program. And so if a woman student goes out and has a good experience in the internship program, she's going to think differently about maybe going into mining, right? But not every woman has a good internship. And we got women who came back saying, I had a terrible time, I'm switching my major. Right? So we have a lot of mining companies that don't know how to do major in the internship. Yeah, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. But I think I know some pretty good questions that we should address. Right? More questions? Okay. See you all tomorrow. Tomorrow, the mining is external visiting. Yeah. So it's sort of like we get final states.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Okay, so this is yours. Thank you. Still, Zoom still connected. So leave.
You know.